The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. I'm so sorry. I'm here to tell you that these times are over. Bless you, whoever wrote this. I think it was a man. It was probably a man. Hi, I'm Jess Grace, and welcome to The Mole Lotus, so named after those who possibly have started a little further down than just the muddy waters when trying to bloom into the lotus flower. Anyway, welcome. Tonight I am going to be talking about Blobby. Blobby? Who is Blobby? Blobby, as I like to refer to, the all, the unknowable, spirit, the universe, God, not Sky Daddy, but that which is the essence of everything. So, big topic, but I feel like I really want to start here. So let us begin. Who is Blobby? Well, I am only ever going to be talking about from my own personal perspective and the way I come to understand things, the way I understand things in my own words, but also the story of how I got there. I'm not somebody that can read textbooks and retain a single syllable. I have ADHD, suspected ASD, CPTSD. So sitting down and reading a textbook, it's just words, and I don't retain knowledge that way. So I learn by doing, and I learn through experience, and I've always been like that, very hands-on. And so here we are. I am at 40, almost 46, and I have had many a life experience and have come to many a great conclusions. But I will start with the fact that I have always thought about this stuff. I've always thought about concepts. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? That kind of stuff. So I'll start with a little story. When I was growing up, I was probably about 6, definitely 6. And my mother used to walk me to and from school. It was my first year of school. A lot happened in that year. I'm beginning to find out or remember or, put into order. But one of the most profound things was a conversation my mother and I were having. So my mother was quite young when she had myself and my brother. I'm the youngest between us two. And she was at university when I was going to kindergarten, and I loved that. She would take us to uni sometimes, and oh gosh, I really loved the smell of the library. And I remember her and I having a conversation once, and we were talking about how can you know that reality exists? I mean, this was probably, it was definitely 1986, and this was back when university was relatively free, and people had time to choose what they actually wanted to do with their lives, and in the meantime educated themselves. Very delightful, very different world, very post-war dream. Anyway, so my mother was obviously having lovely large concepts at university, and I think I just really love my childhood in that perspective, is that my mother was very open-minded and well-educated and a feminist, and kudos to this woman. Anyway, so she posed the question to me, how can you know that anything actually exists? I mean, you're only ever experiencing reality through the inside of this vessel. And so you can never be certain. It's possible that, you're in a dream, and, the reality that we're experiencing is a dream. So the way my little 6-year-old brain took that was, oh no, I'm probably in a white padded cell somewhere, having this wonderful dream about this life, and my poor parents are sitting there watching me do weird stuff all day long, like a crazy. That is a very politically an insensitive word to use, but we used that in the 80s. Anyway, I digress. So every now and then I would when I was walking alone or had some time to play alone, I would stop and I would acknowledge my real parents and say, "Oh, Mum, Dad, I love you so much. I'm so sorry that I'm like this. But, I want you to know I love you and I am having a good time, blah, blah, blah." So I think that sort of sets the stage for why I think about this stuff all the time and why I love talking about it and why I've come to lots of my own conclusions that I can't just read, like a text. I have to experience something and then that makes meaning and then I have this point of view to talk about. And then later I will hear of something quite spiritual that is well known and that correlates with my own experience. So there's that. Welcome to my brain. So Blobby God. Well, Blobby God and I have had a few conversations over the years, and recently he's asked me to be, one of the probably millions of people that are going to give whatever it is a new voice. Because Blobby, he don't think like Sky Daddy. He don't judge like Sky Daddy. The rules of Sky Daddy are out the door, and it is time for a new way of life. And so if that resonates with you, you think about maybe there is God. What does it mean? Why are we here? What's the freaking universe? Well, maybe I'll have some answers for you. They may resonate with you. They may not. And that's perfectly fine. This is just how I experience life. And I just felt called to share it and pushed a little by Blobby. Okay. So when I was growing up, I had grandparents who were quite influential in my upbringing. They would take us to Sunday school. So from a very young age, I had a good understanding of Christianity. I would say it was more under the Protestant sort of teaching side of things. Definitely not Catholic. But because it's funny because my grandfather was like, "Oh, no, Catholics." And I'm pretty sure somebody's Catholic grandparent would say, "Those Protestants." But anyway, same. Shame and guilt is the name of those two games. And I'm, not too well versed in all the religions around the world. I do like to delve into things. I have looked at Theosophy, the Rosicrucians, the Baha'is, understood certain major religions like Buddhism, but take issue with every single one of them. So, I feel like God was like, "Yeah, she's got it. I like what she does with her mind." And if I refer to God as he, it's because my brain is soup and I forget pronouns. God, Blobby, is they. And I should know this by now because we live in this beautiful world of myriad of genders and ways to identify, which I absolutely adore and love. So I apologize in advance for my soup brain. So where was I? Oh, yes, Sky Daddy. I remember thinking at probably about age 11, because I did identify with my mother growing up. She was quite intelligent. I think that she was a very reasonable woman in her brain, and I, wanted to emulate her. So she, at some stage, was just like, "Yeah, I'm an atheist. This is all nonsense and ridiculous," because she got an education. Just saying. And so at one point, I remember talking to Sky Daddy and just saying, "Look, God, I really appreciate everything, but I don't believe in you anymore. And I hope that we can be okay about that." Love Jess. And I don't think I ever stopped ever believing in God, even though at, some point to be cool, I identify as, atheist and then later pragmatic. However, I am a full-blown woo-woo, witchy, goddess worshipping, no, we won't use derogatory terms, but not woo-woo. But I do like to take everything with a beautiful, big, giant grain of salt. So goss is a big word I like to use. Grain of salt, goss, grain of salt, goss. Anyway, so I do know discernment. I appreciate education. And so this is where I've come in and just gone, this is what makes sense to me. This is what feels right for me. And this was what resonates for me. And if you're someone like me that can't quite let go of whatever it is that's doing stuff that we have no way of knowing about. And I mean, scientists, that is what they do all day. They try to understand this universe that we live in. And I like to understand it from a spiritual side. And I think there are other words we can use for these things. I feel like philosophically balancing science and spiritual concepts and philosophy and evidence and studying human nature and patterns. I just think this is what makes sense for me because I'm trying to conquer the world. And yeah, so if it works for me, maybe it'll work for you. Probably. Who knows? Probably not. Who knows? It's up to you. So Sky Daddy, dead to me. Still, though, when I was hitting my, becoming a woman stage, that pre-teen to teen era, there was this fantastic show on Australian TV called The Brides of Christ. And it was actually a little bit raunchy. So obviously that was a little bit leading to my sexual awakening. And I was just besotted with the idea of marrying God. Oh, delicious. I don't know why I would draw, naked women worshipping some sort of altar in the forest, listening to classical music and just going, oh, so romantic. But that's phase. I grew out of it, and I think grunge took its place. Way cooler, and that's probably where I started identifying more so as an atheist. Punk. I loved it. Anyway, then I had a bit of trauma in my childhood. I think everybody does the best that they can. I am never going to be pointing fingers. I think that we just have stuff and we've got to make the best of it in our world. But that doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge it and move on. Oh gosh, no. We always got to do the inner work, the healing, the understanding, the sifting and sorting. And then sometimes you think you've dealt with the matter in your life and some new challenge comes along and you're older and now it's affecting you in this other way that you now have to go back and deal with. Editing Mole here. Sorry to interrupt. I feel like what I'm trying to say here is I am so tired of writing my story from the perspective of a victim. And I don't want to give my narrative that frame anymore. And I want to be empowered by my experiences. So when something that I'm describing is traumatic, I don't like to point fingers. I don't think it's useful to me anymore. I bring up troubled youth is, I was undiagnosed ADHD, probably autistic, and had a lot of trauma, so was dealing with, intense anxiety. But because I have ADHD inattentive, how that presents is just quiet. And you could be in class, you could be nodding your head and looking like that you're paying attention and following along, but actually you're having like 17 conversations in your head, and there's all these people that live in there, and you have wild, like unabandoned thoughts, and you go down rabbit holes, and so your brain is hyperactive, but you appear to be, ditzy. So every day of my life, between certain ages until certain ages, I was pretty miserable. I would call that clinically depressed. Didn't feel good. Didn't experience dopamine. Not a lot of serotonin. And you can imagine that's quite a miserable way of living. But there's this beautiful role that anxiety can play that gives you energy and the ability to want to do things through and over the top of your depression. So I have always relied on anxiety as my energy source and the way of getting over deadlines and, task paralysis. So when I was a certain age, drugs were introduced. And then I'm not going to lie, I'm never going to censor my story for any reason. I offer all my stories and my pearls for free. I'm not selling courses and will never sell courses. So I took drugs. And the first time I took drugs, an amphetamine, I was happy for the first time in my life that I could remember. I experienced this immense joy, and I had a readily supply of dopamine, and so I felt I could conquer the world. And when your brain opens up like that and reaches further places than it's ever reached before, then all those sorts of different concepts and different ways of viewing the world come into play. And I'm not going to lie, I loved it and would do it as much as I could. And I'm not saying that I just did drugs all day, every day. You know, it was like a recreational pastime. However, detrimental, but I wasn't the only one. There are so many of us. It was the mid-late 90s, and it was just prolific. And a lot of us, weren't diagnosed autistic or on the spectrum or ADHD. We weren't accommodated. We just dealt with this horrible way of existence in a world that didn't understand us and didn't have the ability to at that time. Anyway, the more I became passionate about taking recreational drugs, the more drugs I tried. And so there were drugs that would make you hallucinate and I would say, give you the ability and freedom to step away from the collective agreement. And things like psilocybin, DMT, LSD, THC, and I was able to view the world, and I was in touch with my spirituality and had a really wonderful awakening or reawakening into this world that I had rejected because I was trying to be a cool teenager. I'm not saying that I acknowledged Sky Daddy ever again, but I certainly knew that there was more to this world than what the collective agreement was. Now, the collective agreement is what we've all decided that reality is. And magic is some fairy tale, and there's other, ghosts and realms and mythical creatures. So I guess for me, then my hyperactive brain in situations that were painfully boring, which was most of the time, just sat and think about these concepts. And that is just who I've been ever since. So the conclusion that I've come up with, and I have a few different ways of explaining Blobby. My favorite is the first time that I really felt something really resonant in a movie, and that was The Never-Ending Story. And I feel like anybody that was born in the 80s or 90s will resonate with the magic of that movie. And so for me, when Atreyu, prompted by Sebastian, by reading The Never-Ending Story, visits Morla, and there's this big giant snail. If you haven't seen it, I won't give away the ending. Big giant snail. Atreyu goes to, seek its wisdom, and the snail's talking to Atreyu, and he's just a big snail, or tortoise, turtle, something like that. Old and wise and slow moving. Anyway, the turtle keeps referring to we. And Atreyu's like, I don't see anyone else here. What's going on with that? And Morlor is like, we haven't spoken to anyone for such a long time, so we started talking to ourselves. And that, my friends, is Blobby God. So, you might have seen lots of wonderful memes on the internet. I think Jim Carrey went very far down this rabbit hole, and I've never seen him again. And bless him, for whatever. I mean, they said there was a robot of him at the recent awards. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand anything that's going on in the media anymore, and nor do I care to. It's just breaking down. Anyway, so the concept is that I thought about and have dragged with me throughout life is that the universe, the all, God, is created, and it's just that's the only thing that exists, right? And that's really boring. And why? There's no way to experience anything if it's just you're this big fucking endless, eternal, infinite mass, or not mass. Who knows what it is? Might be one particle. Anyway, so that's how I always viewed God. Was like it got bored and started fragmenting itself to experience. And so later on, obviously that's just where I've always resonated from, probably from when I saw the Never-Ending Story, but probably maybe at about 12, a few more years down, just going, oh, wow, maybe that's what's going on, Okay. Now, more recently, in the past 5 years, I saw a fantastic meme, and I'm a huge meme person. Apparently, there's a thing called memeology. I'm going to look into that. I haven't done it yet. I've been putting it off, but it sounds fascinating and right up my alley, and up Blobby's. So the meme is, or it's some extraction from X or Twitter, where a lady is explaining that earthworms have their taste buds all over their body. And so when an earthworm is moving through the dirt, which is its food source, it is in just joyous ecstasy, tasting everything all the time. It's not just limited to this tiny little space. And so he's moving along, he's going, this is great, oh my God, I love life. And then that also resonated with me, because I feel like if Blobby God is infinite, and, it's just fragmenting constantly, creating and reabsorbing and recreating. But, expansion, the way of nature, creating more and more characters and more stories and more different ways to experience things. For me, Blobby God's taste buds are little fingers all over this giant earthworm, and each finger represents us. And he's got his little finger in there, and he's experiencing everything that we're doing. And I think, to me, that's how I would explain the observer effect, even though, scientifically, that's absolutely not what any scientist would say. But I just feel like there's this little bit of Blobby that is constantly watching, because it's ecstasy for Blobby to experience us. Now, next bit's controversial. I have got some work to do, so I'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Sorry, that was the intermission. So yeah, it's the next day, and I was dealing with a Blobby God plot twist. Very cool. I will tell you a tale about it someday. Now, the controversy is Blobby God doesn't care about what you do. He's not sitting there and judging you from a moralistic point of view. It is just enjoying your life and the experience that you are offering it. So it likes your drama. It likes your failure. It likes your mistakes. It loves the tale of the underdog, and you going through these trials and tribulations and figuring out how to master yourself. And so for me, Sky Daddy has always been this entity that makes us experience mostly just shame and guilt about everything and all, and especially shame and guilt around our desire and our passion and our wants and our creative imaginations. And I really I just hate that for humanity. I hate that for you. I hate it for me. I hate it for everybody. I'm so sick of us all being so miserable all the time. You know, I feel like our emotions are our guideposts. You know, sure, jealousy, right? It's not a great place to live inside of for an extended period. But when you allow yourself to have your emotions and express them, they can only last for 90 seconds if we fully, properly immerse ourselves in the experience of having an emotion. And so let's say with jealousy, when you have jealousy, all it is showing you something that you want for yourself. And when you realize that, the jealousy dissipates and you have a desire and you go after it and you have motion. So to be in a constant state, if your base state is shame or guilt or a combination of both, it is not how Blobby God wants you to experience the majority of your time during your life. So for me, I feel like the base, sort of essence that we should be living in is curiosity and willingness to find out. What have we got today? I am willing to discover, instead of constantly trying to control the narrative by having anxiety of the future, and then also like trying to avoid more shame and guilt because we're so heavily invested in where we went wrong in the past, and to not ever repeat those same mistakes. And the present moment is eternal. And so when we're living in the future or the past, we're not experiencing the magic of where we are supposed to be spending the majority of our lives in the present moment. And shame and guilt will absolutely destroy your experience if that is your base, right? So Blobby God he doesn't care. He doesn't care if you broke someone's heart. He doesn't care if you backpacked your way through Europe while being a prostitute. He doesn't. It doesn't care. It doesn't. It just enjoys you doing things and you having emotions and thoughts about those things and applying those thoughts and emotions into wisdom and shaping the parameters that it set out for you when you were born. So I guess I might have skipped ahead a bit there, because I feel like Blobby God will set your parameters. Have you ever smelt a newborn baby? And, if you know, it smells divine. It just does. It is this delicious, new, amazing thing. And for me, I think it's because when you come into the world, you are your most authentic self. That is, Blobby God has built your avatar. He's given you these, passions and desires and little quirks and abilities, and you come in and you're just as a factory set it. So you come into the world with your brand new factory settings, and then, life happens. We are raised by parents and institutions. I've spoken about this before, but to reiterate, we learn to mask the things that, the collective agreement has deemed inappropriate, and that leads to us fragmenting ourselves and chopping away parts of ourselves in order to, be accepted within the herd. And then we just become distorted. But Blobby God didn't want any of that to happen to you. Or maybe it's part of the process. So there is a principle in the Kabbalion that sort of the law of rhythm. So things go through cycles, and it's quite possible that we're designed to come in factory settings, get it all muddled up, change the settings, play around with it, and then eventually realize that the factory settings were the best settings, and then go about trying to reverse engineer and come back to the way that we were designed to be. And in the process, we have expanded into like a co-creation between Blobby God and you, the avatar. So we will never be that factory setting that came into the world in that pure, delightful new baby smell. But we certainly can grow into something better than maybe Blobby God had envisioned on its own. So Blobby God wants you to use your life experiences like a bag of wealth. And we can't hoard wealth. We can't really hoard anything. We don't get to take anything with us when we die, except for our experience and the way that we've interpreted that and our story through our eyes, as well as Blobby God constantly observing it. But I feel like moving forward, we're in a place of chaos, and we're trying to reorder things from this chaos, because I think most people, bar a few, billionaires who are really not a very large percentage. I think I saw it was like 0.001% of the population. Charles said, no, that's enough. 0.1% of the population are billionaires, right? They're the ones making all the decisions. They're the ones having a good time. And they're not having a good time because they're hoarding, because they're distorted. Anyway, I will talk about that later. But so nobody's having a good time. And I think we all would probably like to have a much better time. If we have the technology now to actually everybody have, access to 2,300 calories a day, and to have automation of things that break our bodies. And there is enough for a universal basic income. So, we all want to create because we are made in the steam of Blobby God. That is what that meant, in that we are creative beings. So I think for me, moving forward, I am learning how to live as best I can, getting back to my factory settings, as well as bringing my bag of experience, which is my true treasure, and stepping outside of that shame and guilt and stepping into willingness and curiosity, because that makes for a way better plot than what Sky Daddy had in mind. We're just sort of going to be like really well behaved and do nothing out of the ordinary. And oh gosh, we love watching drama. We want drama. We want story arcs. Like, we want people to make mistakes and then come back from them. Anyway, so when you go on and die, you can't take your wealth, but you can take your wisdom. And I think that that's really, really beautiful. And it's a beautiful way to live, and it's a light way to live. So our mistakes are our treasures, and our experience are our treasures. And that's what Blobby God wants you to understand about its new voice moving forward in this point in time. So I touched on before this one particle theory. It's actually single particle theory, and it's a hypothesis that all electrons and positrons are actually manifestations of a single entity moving backwards and forwards in time. So they noticed that the positrons or electrons look identical, no variations, everything exactly the same. And so the idea is that this one electron or positron, I'm not a science person, is actually moving back and forth through time and making up the whole of everything everywhere, in every moment in time. Every dinosaur, tree, star, you is just made up from this one electron. Electron? Yeah, let's just stick with electron. And it's just like, whoa, I'm everywhere. And that blows my mind. And I don't like that for Blobby God. So let's pretend this one electron is Blobby God. And so Blobby God, we experiences this vastness because it's infinite. But it's actually just one electron. And I feel like, gosh, that's just such a lot of work and so busy and fast. And wow, it makes me want to have a nap. But that's something to ponder and expand your mind. And I've been doing that recently. And I'm just like, well, I am not an electron. So I guess I can't fathom that experience from my perspective as a big, giant human being. So it feels very uncomfortable for me. But possibly the electron is having the best, most ecstatic time being everywhere all at once, doing all the things. I want to leave with a principle, the first principle from the Kabbalion, the 7 Hermetic laws, and that is the principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. So I'll read it. Go on. The principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite living mind. So originally I thought that I was God, and I think we might have all done that. Well, probably not actually. No, but just like that concept that we are creating the universe through our consciousness, and so therefore wouldn't we be God? And I guess this is suggesting that no, not quite. That we are living in the mind of the all, what I like to call Blobby, and so we exist in the laws of that realm. But for me, I guess that I have a part of that universe that's my real estate. And it's a gift from Blobby God. And that's the finger, the taste bug, the sense that belongs to Blobby that is constantly observing. And that's my real estate in its mental universe. But, and I will leave on this note, I talked once about, God, saying, of course you're lovable. I made you. I don't make mistakes. How dare you? But what I experience sometimes when I am meditating is I can see this eye that opens up and it's watching me. And I feel like there's this other sort of personality that I can fall into at times. When I'm overwhelmed with emotion, I know that I can stop myself and be in that sort of motionless, observer-y kind of state, as well as, as stonkered as I can get drinking wine with my besties. There's a part of me that's constantly sober. And so I feel like that's that observer, right? That thing that's constantly watching. And what I kind of came to this conclusion is whenever I was at my lowest low or my darkest hours, is that I never looked away. It never looked at me with shame. It was never disappointed. It always was watching and I feel like that is pure unconditional love. And that is how Blobby God loves you, and how you should feel about being here in this world is unconditionally loved, no matter who you are and what you do. And I know for me, the controversial part is, even if you are a murderer, even if you've done wrong things, the horriblest of things, there's never not space for you to take that and turn it into treasure. I'm not condoning murder or anything that is going to harm another person, and that's just part of my spiritual nature, is to, where I can, not cause harm. But I'm also not going to, walk around with a brush and, ensuring I never walk on a bug. I'm on my journey, and they're on their journey, but I'm not going to kill someone about it. Anyway, I just want you to know that Blobby wants you to know that you are loved unconditionally, and that you can now step into this time where you have curiosity, willingness, and lightness to live your life moving forward. Okay, so if you like that, please like, subscribe, have a really great rest of whatever it is that you're doing. Chelsea, are we going to walk? Come on, let's go. You can do it. Yes, you can.